The sky was bleeding fire. Over the Pacific Rim, a storm unlike any Earth had ever seen cracked open the heavens. Wind screamed with the voice of an angry god, and lightning forked like claws across black clouds, tearing holes in the sky. Cities lay still below, powerless, watching nature itself lose control. High above Tokyo, where the storm's heart pulsed the loudest, Green Lantern Hal Jordan hovered in midair. His emerald ring hummed against his skin, glowing brighter with every second. He fought to keep the winds from ripping the city apart. But something was wrong. This wasn't just weather. It moved with purpose. It hunted like a beast. And then, through the fire and smoke, he saw her. She floated at the storm's center, arms limp at her sides, hair whipping like white flame in the violent wind. Storm Girl. No, not a girl. A force. Her eyes were closed, her lips slightly parted, and her body trembled as arcs of lightning danced across her skin like angry spirits. She wasn't the storm's master. She was its prisoner. Who are you? Hal whispered under his breath, though no one could hear. The ring pulsed once, reading her energy. Off the charts. Unstable. Alive. A bolt of lightning cracked too close. He surged forward. She didn't move, not even when the flames curled near her feet, not when the sky howled her name through a voice made of wind. Hal reached her just as the fire roared to life beneath her, an unnatural blaze rising from the clouds themselves. Without hesitation, he wrapped her in green light and yanked her from the center of the storm. The moment his construct touched her, everything shifted. The storm screamed. Wind turned to silence. Time paused. Her eyes snapped open. Blue lightning stared back at him, wild and afraid. She gasped, her breath hitching like she hadn't taken one in days. Her fingers clenched around his forearm, like the world might disappear if she let go. "Don't let them take me back," she said. Her voice was small, broken, but it cracked something deep inside him. Then the sky exploded. Behind them, the storm retaliated, spinning faster, lashing out. Fire danced in the air, chasing them as Hal flew them out of the heart of the chaos, green energy burning at full power. He didn't know who they were. He didn't know what she was. But he knew fear when he saw it. And he knew strength. She wasn't just a weapon. She was a person. And someone had lit a fire around her heart and called it control. He tightened his grip. "I've got you," he said. The storm tried to drag them back, but Hal pushed harder, fighting the wind, the flames, the weight of everything unknown. He broke through the edge of the tempest, green light streaking across the sky like a comet. When they finally reached the edge of the clouds, the city below breathed again. The storm began to fall apart. And in his arms, Storm Girl looked up at him, dazed, exhausted, but alive. Her voice was no louder than a whisper. "You should have left me." Hal looked down at her, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. "No," he said, quietly but firmly. "Not a chance." Far behind them, in the heart of the broken sky, something ancient stirred. And the world would never be the same. The wind had finally calmed, but the air was thick with a sense of uncertainty. Hal hovered above a broken stretch of Icelandic tundra, the place they had retreated to. The storm had been left behind, but its echoes still roared inside Hal's chest. His green ring flickered faintly, its glow dulling in exhaustion. The energy required to stop a storm of that magnitude was a strain even for him, but it hadn't been the weather he feared. It had been her. He looked down at Storm Girl, now sitting on a large stone slab, her knees drawn to her chest. The fire in her eyes had been replaced by shadows of doubt. Her clothes were singed from the heat, her hair damp from the storm's rain. Yet it was her eyes that drew him in, the dark blue, cracked with the weight of 1,000 storms, and the flickering uncertainty that lingered there. She was quiet for too long. Hal's boots landed softly on the ground next to her, the green glow from his ring illuminating the area in a soft, otherworldly light. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice softer than he intended. Her eyes met his, piercing, defiant, and she exhaled like she had been holding her breath for centuries. "You shouldn't have saved me," she whispered. "I'm not someone you should want around." Hal's heart skipped a beat. The words hit harder than he could have prepared for, sharp like the jagged edges of the storm that had almost torn them apart. "I don't believe that," he said, his voice steady, though his mind screamed with questions he couldn't ask. He knelt beside her, taking in the sight of her raw skin, the faint trails of energy running across her body. The storm hadn't just ravaged the earth. It had left marks on her, too. Her laugh was hollow, tinged with pain. "You think you understand, don't you? What it means to be this." She held her hand out, fingers crackling with blue lightning that danced between her fingertips like a live wire. Hall stared at it, mesmerized. He knew the power of his own ring, the energy it could summon. But this was different. This was wild, unpredictable, dangerous. It was a rawness, a force of nature he couldn't tame, even if he tried. "I don't want to understand it," he said, his voice firm as he gently took her hand in his. The touch was electric, the air around them charged with a crackling energy. "I just want to help. Let me help." Her gaze faltered, her expression softening just a fraction. But before she could speak, a distant noise shattered the silence. The sound of something descending through the atmosphere, breaking the sky like thunder. Hal's ring flared to life, sensing the disturbance before it reached them. His body tensed, instinctively pulling her close. "Get back," he ordered, his voice sharp as he raised his hand, his ring glowing bright. But she didn't move. Instead, she stepped forward, her own power flaring, blue lightning tracing down her arms. "No," she said quietly. "I'm not afraid of them." Hall turned to face her, confusion furrowing his brow. "You should be, if they're who I think they are." A dark, sleek airship emerged from the clouds, cutting through the fog like a blade. It hovered ominously above them, and Hal's heart sank. He recognized the design, the marks of the architects, the shadowy figures who had experimented with her. And they had come to take her back. Her breath caught, and her eyes widened in fear, not of the ship, but of what it represented. "They're here," she whispered. "I can't run anymore." Hall tightened his grip on her hand. "Then we fight." The architect's ship hovered above them like a dark omen, its massive shadow swallowing the land beneath. Hall could feel the weight of it pressing down on him, like a storm ready to burst. He turned to Storm Girl, Kalia, and saw the fear in her eyes, a fear she hadn't shown before. Not when the world burned around her, not when she'd fought her way through every storm to escape. "Stay close," he said, his voice steady, yet taut with the realization of what was coming. He reached for his ring, tightening his grip. It glowed with the green light of willpower, ready to defend. But Kalia didn't move. She stood tall, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths, and when she looked up, her eyes weren't filled with fear anymore. They were filled with defiance. "They've come for me before," she said softly, almost to herself. "I thought I could outrun them." Hal's heart ached as he studied her. She wasn't just running from them. She was running from herself. The power that lay beneath her skin, the storm that lived inside her, was something she had never learned to control. And the architects, they were the ones who had created it. The ship descended slowly, its engines humming like a deep growl. Hal's eyes narrowed. He couldn't let them take her back. Not after everything they'd just been through. And not after seeing what was so clearly in her. She wasn't a weapon to be reclaimed. She was a person, a woman, and a force of nature. He stood beside her, the green light of his ring casting eerie shadows on the ground. "If they want to fight, they'll get one," he said, voice low but resolute. But Kalia stepped forward, her fingers crackling with blue lightning. It arced up from her arms, running down her fingertips, wild and uncontrolled. "No," she said, her voice cutting through the tension. "I'm not letting you fight my battles." Hal's hand reached out instinctively, trying to stop her, but she pulled away, taking a step back, her eyes sharp with purpose. "This is mine to finish," she continued, her voice steady. "It's my storm, and I'll face them." Before Hal could respond, the doors of the ship opened, revealing dark, armored figures. The architects. They'd moved with precision, their faces masked, their presence as cold and calculated as the machines they controlled. They didn't hesitate. Each one raised a weapon, sharp and deadly, aimed directly at Kalia. Hal stepped in front of her, his ring flaring with energy. "You'll have to go through me first." Kalia reached out and touched his arm, her fingers sending a jolt of electricity through him. He winced but didn't pull away. She was stronger than she realized, stronger than she gave herself credit for. "No," she said again, her voice firm this time. "I'm done running, Hal." The air around them shifted, crackling with the electricity building in her body. Hal could see it in her eyes. She wasn't just going to fight the architects. She was going to fight herself, face the storm within, and prove she was more than the force they'd tried to make her. The architects raised their weapons, a barrage of energy bolts ready to launch. But before they could fire, Kalia stepped forward, her arms lifting as if to call the storm back into her. And then, everything exploded. A massive surge of blue lightning tore through the air, ripping apart the ground beneath them. The blast sent the architects' weapons flying, and the ship's hull cracked under the power of the energy that erupted from Kalia's core. Hal barely managed to raise a shield in time, but even the strength of his ring couldn't contain the raw power that radiated from her. It was beyond control, beyond anything either of them had expected. The architects staggered back, their eyes wide in disbelief. Kalia stood at the center, her body surrounded by a maelstrom of energy, the storm within her finally unleashed. "This is my battle," she said again, her voice like thunder, "and I will not be their weapon any longer." Hal watched her, awestruck by the storm she had become. But as the dust settled, he realized this wasn't just her fight anymore. It was their fight. Together. The storm raged around them, but in that moment, it was as if the world had disappeared. The air hummed with power, crackling with electricity that hummed under Hal's skin. His ring was still glowing brightly, but nothing could have prepared him for the force Kalia was now wielding. She stood at the epicenter of a storm she had created, a tempest of lightning and energy that seemed to stretch into infinity. But there was something else in her eyes now, something soft, vulnerable. Her storm had become her shield, but it was also her prison. It was a reflection of everything she had been running from, everything she had been hiding from. Hal stepped closer to her, the glow of his green ring illuminating the space between them. "Kalia," he said, his voice barely rising above the wind. "You don't have to do this alone." She didn't turn to face him, but her shoulders relaxed slightly, the storm around her lessening in intensity. "I've always been alone," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "They created me to be a weapon. They made me this way, always on the edge of losing control." Her eyes flashed with blue lightning, and Hal could see the turmoil swirling within her. Hal's heart clenched. He knew what it felt like to carry a burden like that. He, too, had once been alone, burdened by a responsibility he hadn't asked for, by a power that came with a price. He understood her more than she realized. "You don't have to carry that weight by yourself," he repeated. He took another step forward, closing the distance between them, and this time she didn't pull away. Her storm began to settle, the wild arcs of lightning dying down to small, flickering bursts. For the first time, Hal saw her, really saw her, without the chaos of the storm. She was just a woman, strong and fragile in the same breath, her face painted with a quiet desperation that tore at him. "Let me help," he said, and before she could respond, he reached out, gently cupping her face with his hand. The moment their skin touched, a shiver ran through them both. Her energy surged, briefly overwhelming him, but he held firm. He didn't let go. Her eyes searched his, confusion and pain mingling in their depths. "How can you help me?" Her voice was a whisper barely audible over the wind. "I'm nothing but a weapon." Hal's thumb brushed gently against her cheek. "You're more than that," he said, his words carrying the weight of everything he had come to understand about her in such a short time. "You're not a weapon. You're a person. And I'm here for you, no matter what." Callia's breath hitched, and for the first time, she looked vulnerable. Her guard was down, the storm within her simmering but not exploding. I don't know what to do with that," she whispered, her voice faltering. Hal's gaze softened, and he gently pulled her closer, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel the hum of her power beneath the surface, like the quiet before a storm. But in this moment, it wasn't overwhelming. It was just them. "I'm not asking you to do anything," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm asking you to trust me." Her lips parted as if she were about to say something, but before she could, there was a sudden shift in the air, a crackling tension that sliced through the calm. The architects weren't done. They never were. Hal's eyes flicked up, and he saw the dark shape of their ship descending once more, the hum of its engines reverberating in the distance. "They're coming," Callia said, her voice laced with determination. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was resolve. Hal stepped back, his green light flaring to life again. "Then we fight together." She nodded, her expression hardening, the storm inside her returning with a vengeance. But this time, it was different. She was no longer alone in it. And as they stood together, side by side, with the world on the brink of chaos around them, Hal knew that the battle ahead would test them both. But in this moment, as they faced the storm together, he felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. The ship descended again, its dark form cutting through the swirling remnants of Callia's storm. The air buzzed with electricity, thick and heavy, as if the sky itself were holding its breath. The green glow of Hal's ring flickered with tension, casting harsh shadows over the rocky terrain where they stood. He had felt this before, the cold certainty of a battle he didn't want but knew was inevitable. The architects were relentless. Callia's hand tightened into a fist, her knuckles crackling with blue lightning. The surge of power that had been simmering beneath her skin was now fully awake. She was no longer the scared girl running from her past. She was the storm, fierce and unstoppable. "They never stop," she muttered, her voice low and bitter. Hal turned toward her, his gaze soft but determined. "And we won't either." A chill ran through him as the doors of the ship opened, and the architects emerged. Tall, cloaked in dark armor, their faces obscured by cold, featureless masks. They moved with precision, a calculated army of shadows, and their presence made the ground tremble beneath Hal's feet. Their leader, a towering figure draped in black, stepped forward, his hand raised to silence the others. "Callia," the architect's voice echoed, metallic and detached. "You've made a mistake. You cannot run from your destiny. Return with us. The storm inside you is meant to be harnessed, controlled." Callia's lips curled into a snarl. "I'm not your weapon," she spat, her voice filled with quiet fury. The architect's eyes, hidden behind his mask, seemed to narrow. "You are nothing but a weapon, and you always have been. It's only a matter of time before you come to understand that." Hal stepped forward, the green light from his ring flaring brighter as he placed himself between Callia and the architect. "You're wrong," he said, his voice steady and resolute. "She's not your tool. She's a person, and she has a right to decide her fate." The architect didn't flinch, but the air around them seemed to crackle with tension. The wind picked up again, howling as if it were echoing their confrontation. Hal could feel the storm building in the distance, not just in the sky, but inside Callia too. The battle was coming. "You think you can stop us?" The architect sneered. "You are but a lone soldier in a war you cannot win." Hal's grip tightened on his ring. He wasn't just fighting for Callia anymore. He was fighting for their future, the future where she was free. The storm inside her was no longer something to fear. It was something to embrace. "I'm not alone," Hall said, his voice ringing with the weight of his promise. In that instant, Kalia stepped forward, her eyes blazing with blue fire. The storm she had once feared now pulsed within her, alive and powerful. Her arms rose, and the sky responded. Lightning crackled, and the earth beneath them shook. The architects flinched, not prepared for the raw energy that erupted from her. "Go!" Kalia shouted, her voice breaking through the chaos. "I'm done being their weapon. This ends now." The storm roared to life around her, a swirling vortex of blue and white energy. But this time, it wasn't out of control. It was focused. It was hers. Hall raised his ring high, channeling its green light into the storm, helping her shape it, directing its power in a way that felt right. Together, they were unstoppable. The architects tried to advance, but the storm pushed them back, a wall of pure energy that blasted them off their feet. The ground beneath them cracked and splintered as Kalia's power grew, each bolt of lightning a strike of liberation. "We're not your slaves," Kalia shouted, her voice full of both rage and freedom. "We're not your weapons. We're free." The architect leader raised his hand, a signal for his soldiers to retreat. They were not ready for this, not for the storm that Kalia had become, not for the bond she and Hall had forged. They had underestimated the power of a person who had finally claimed her own strength. As the ship began to lift, retreating into the darkening sky, Hall turned to Kalia, his eyes filled with awe. "You did it." She didn't respond at first. Instead, she lowered her hands, the storm subsiding around them, leaving a stillness that felt almost sacred. She looked at him, her eyes softening for the first time, the weight of her past slowly lifting. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered. Hall smiled, his chest swelling with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. He had found something worth fighting for, something more powerful than any storm. And in that moment, they both knew that the battle wasn't over. But together, they would face whatever came next. The world seemed to hold its breath in the aftermath of the battle. The storm had subsided, leaving behind a landscape that was both eerily still and yet alive with the remnants of power. The ground was cracked, the air thick with ozone, and the once turbulent sky had transformed into a dark, clouded canvas. But in that stillness, amidst the chaos of the battle they had just fought, there was something new, something fragile yet strong, between Hall and Kalia. They stood side by side, their gazes drawn to the horizon, where the architect's ship had vanished. The enemy had retreated, but the weight of the battle still hung heavy in the air. Kalia's breathing was shallow, her body exhausted from the immense energy she had unleashed, but her eyes glowed with a quiet fire, an inner strength she had finally allowed herself to claim. She looked at Hall, the man who had stood beside her, believed in her when she could barely believe in herself. "You were incredible," Hall said, his voice low, filled with awe. He watched as the last crackling arcs of blue lightning faded from her fingertips. The storm had been her power, but it was more than that. It was her heart, her will, now fully awakened. Kalia shook her head, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corner of her lips. "It wasn't just me," she said. Her voice was soft, but there was no trace of doubt left. "You helped me, more than you know." Hall stepped closer, his green ring still glowing softly, illuminating their faces in the dim twilight. His eyes met hers, and in that moment, everything that had brought them to this point, the battles, the storms, the moments of uncertainty, felt insignificant compared to what they had become together. "You didn't need me to fight your battles," he said, the words almost a whisper. "You just needed someone to believe you could win them." The words hit her harder than she expected, sinking deep into her chest. It was true. She had spent so much of her life running from who she was, from the chaos inside her, that she had forgotten she didn't need to face it alone. And Hall had reminded her of that, showed her that she wasn't just a storm to be contained. She was more. "Maybe I needed to believe it, too," Kalia admitted, her voice tinged with vulnerability. That I wasn't just the storm. That I could be something else. Hall smiled, his eyes warm with something unspoken. It was in that look, the quiet understanding between them, that the weight of their connection settled into place. They were no longer strangers bound by circumstances. They were partners, forged by fire and lightning, and the bond they shared was something neither of them could deny. Before either of them could speak again, the ground beneath them trembled, a low rumble that spread outward like the first warning of an approaching tempest. Hal's eyes narrowed, and his hand instinctively went to the ring on his finger, but Kalia stopped him with a simple gesture. "No," she said softly, turning to face him, her expression hardening. "This isn't over." The calm they had found was fleeting. The architects would return, and this time, they wouldn't retreat so easily. But as the rumble grew louder, shaking the earth beneath them, there was no fear in her eyes, only resolve. "We'll face it together," Hall said, his voice steady, and it wasn't just a promise, it was a certainty. Kalia nodded, the storm within her stirring once more. But this time, it wasn't wild or uncontrolled. This time, it was focused. And it was hers. They stood together as the sky darkened, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The battle was far from over, but now, they had something stronger than power. They had each other. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the air itself seemed to crackle with an energy that made the hairs on the back of Hal's neck stand on end. The rumbling had grown louder, echoing across the horizon, and a dark cloud was rising from the distant mountains, swirling, thickening, and barreling toward them. Kalia's storm was nothing compared to this. "They're coming," Hall said, his voice tight, his gaze fixed on the growing darkness. The energy he had felt from the architects before, cold, calculating, was nothing like the raw power that was gathering now. This was different. This was something ancient. Kalia's eyes narrowed as she scanned the horizon. "It's them, isn't it?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with a quiet dread. She could feel it too, the pull of something far more dangerous than the architects, something that made even her storm feel like a fleeting breeze. "Not just the architects," Hall said, his tone grim. This is their true purpose. They'd been hiding something. And now, they're ready to bring it to light." The sky overhead darkened, and the first flash of lightning tore through the clouds. But it wasn't the blue of Kalia's storm. It was red, angry, violent. The temperature seemed to drop as if the air itself were choking under the weight of the approaching storm. Kalia stepped forward, her hands crackling with her own blue lightning, but she hesitated. She could feel the immense force building, pressing down on her. She had fought her entire life to control the storm within. But this was something else. It was bigger than her, bigger than them both. "We can't stop this alone," she said, her voice strained. Hall turned to her, his green ring glowing fiercely in the encroaching darkness. "We don't have to. Not anymore. We've been through too much to back down now." Kalia looked at him, her eyes searching his face, and in that moment, she realized that this wasn't just about stopping the threat. This was about choosing to face the unknown, together. They had faced the storm before, but this time, it was different. This time, it wasn't just her fight. It was theirs. The ground shook again, a massive tremor that sent cracks sprawling across the earth beneath them. The red lightning intensified, arcing across the sky in violent, erratic patterns. The architect's ship loomed in the distance, now surrounded by a massive cloud of swirling darkness. It was as if the sky itself had come alive, bent on destruction. But Kalia didn't flinch. Her heart raced, her pulse pounding in her ears, but the storm inside her began to quiet. She reached for Hal's hand, her fingers trembling as she laced them through his. "You're not alone anymore," Hall said, squeezing her hand gently. "We face this together." With that, she nodded, feeling the full weight of their bond. They were no longer two strangers caught in a world of chaos. They were a force, a team, united by everything they had been through. And now, as the storm reached its peak, they would fight with everything they had left. Kalia raised her arms, her body alight with blue energy. The storm within her roared to life, swirling in time with the chaos around them. Hal's ring flared brighter, casting green light across the swirling maelstrom. Together, they stood as one, ready to confront whatever the storm had in store. The architect's ship descended rapidly, surrounded by the shifting shadows of what appeared to be a new kind of force, something darker, older. They had brought with them a power that seemed to warp the very fabric of reality itself. The storm that had gathered around them was unlike anything Kalia had ever felt. And then, out of the darkness, something began to emerge. A figure, tall and cloaked in shadow, dropped to the ground before them, its form almost human but not quite. It was a creature of nightmares, with eyes like burning coals, and a presence that felt as if the very earth itself had bowed before it. Kalia. The voice was deep, echoing through the thunderous air. You have come to understand your power, but it is too late. The storm will be yours to control, or it will destroy you. Hall stepped in front of her, his body tense, ready to defend. Not today, he said, his voice unwavering. We fight. The creature's gaze turned toward him, its eyes glowing with malicious intent. You are nothing but a shadow in the storm. You will fall like all the rest. The words hung heavy in the air, and in that moment, Kalia knew they were facing something much darker than they had ever imagined. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She raised her hands again, her storm intensifying, surging through her, and with Hal by her side, she would not let it consume her. Together, they would face the darkness. The storm raged above them, the sky alive with ferocious energy as the creature loomed between them. Its eyes, red and burning like the embers of a dying star, were fixed on Kalia, as though it could see through her, into the very core of her being. The air was thick, suffocating with the weight of what was to come. Thunder cracked, and the earth trembled beneath their feet. Kalia's heart pounded, but it wasn't fear that twisted in her chest. It was something deeper, a resolve she hadn't fully understood until now. This was her fight. This was her moment. The creature's voice echoed again, a deep, rumbling sound that felt like it came from the very bowels of the earth. You cannot control what you are, Kalia. Your power is not yours to command. It belongs to us. The storm is not your ally. It is your prison. Hall stepped forward, his green ring casting an emerald glow over the land, sharp and bright against the swirling darkness. No, the storm doesn't own her. She owns it. Kalia looked at him, her eyes wide with a realization that had been growing since the moment they had faced their first battle together. He had believed in her when no one else had. And now, as the creature's shadow seemed to swallow them whole, Kalia knew the truth. She was not alone. And she never had been. Hal's hand brushed hers, a quiet touch that sent a shock of warmth through her, grounding her amidst the chaos. She felt the weight of the storm inside her, felt it swirling and growing. But now, it didn't feel like a beast she had to fight. It was part of her. It was her. She raised her arms, her fingers crackling with blue lightning. The wind howled, and the storm responded to her, answering her call. But this time, it wasn't a wild, uncontrollable force. It was hers to wield, to bend to her will. I won't be your weapon, Kalia shouted, her voice cutting through the wind. And I won't be your prisoner. The creature's eyes flashed with anger. You are nothing but a child, playing with forces you do not understand. Kalia's storm surged around her, the power growing until the sky above seemed to collapse in on itself. The earth cracked open, streaks of lightning splitting the heavens, but instead of being consumed by it, she became one with it. She was the storm, and the storm was her. The creature let out a low, mocking laugh, but its confidence faltered as the power in the air intensified. Kalia's eyes glowed with a fierce, unrelenting light. The blue energy surged through her like fire, a torrent that couldn't be extinguished. And then, with a mighty roar, she unleashed it. The blast of energy was so intense that it lit up the entire sky. The ground cracked and buckled beneath the force, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The creature howled as the power of Kalia's storm hit it like a tidal wave, tossing it backward, its dark form flickering like a shadow in the light. Hal's ring flared brighter, his energy weaving with hers, a perfect harmony between two forces that had once seemed so different, so separate. Together, they were unstoppable. He raised his ring, focusing all its power into a single beam of green energy that collided with the storm in a brilliant explosion of light. For a moment, the world was silent. The storm had calmed, and the crackling energy in the air hung like a breath held too long. The creature lay on the ground, its form now a twisted, smoking ruin. It didn't move. It didn't speak. Kalia stood, breathing heavily, her hands still crackling with the remnants of energy. But the storm had passed, and in its place was something new, something powerful, but peaceful. She turned to Hall, her heart pounding not from the battle, but from the realization that they had done it. Together. Hall smiled at her, his voice soft but full of pride. "You did it. You're free." She nodded, her chest swelling with a sense of peace she had never known. The storm was still within her, but now it was hers to control, and with Hal by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. As the first light of dawn broke through the dark clouds, Kalia stepped forward, her hand reaching for Hal's. Together, they looked out over the horizon, knowing that their journey was far from over. But no matter the storms ahead, they would face them together. And for the first time in her life, Kalia was no longer afraid.